Your feet are already cut. You didn't notice until now. There's no water in sight, and the sun hasn't even reached its highest point yet. You'd be dead by nightfall. And that's not an insult. That's a fact backed by decades of research into how hunter-gatherers actually lived. You probably think you'd manage. Find some berries, catch a fish, build a fire, tough it out for one day. How hard could it be? For roughly 95% of human history, this was simply how every single person lived, every single day without exception. So why is it that almost nobody alive today could survive even 24 hours the way their ancestors did for thousands of generations? Let's start with what you'd actually need to know before you even leave camp. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent time in the 1960s studying the hoansi people of the Kalahari Desert, one of the most detailed looks ever taken at how hunter-gatherers actually get their food. What he found surprised almost everyone. These weren't people living on the edge of starvation, scraping by on whatever they could find. Lee documented that the hoansi recognized over 100 edible plant species in their environment, and adult foragers typically brought in enough food in just a few hours of work to feed their families for the day. 100 plants, not 5, not 10, 100, each one identified correctly, each one known for exactly when it was ripe, where it grew, and how to prepare it so it wouldn't make you sick. Could you identify one edible plant in a random forest right now with total confidence, knowing which lookalike species would poison you instead? Probably not. And that gap right there is the first reason you wouldn't last a day. Food is only half the problem. The other half is water, and water doesn't announce itself. Anthropologist James Suzman, who has spent years studying and writing about the hoansi, and other hunting and gathering societies, has described how deeply this knowledge runs. Finding water in dry, unfamiliar terrain isn't about walking until you spot a river. It's about reading subtle signs in the landscape, which plants only grow near underground moisture, which animal tracks lead toward water sources, which slight color changes in the sand mean something is buried just beneath the surface. This is knowledge passed down and refined over a lifetime, starting in early childhood. You don't learn it from a survival show. You learn it from decades of watching, failing, and trying again in the exact same landscape. Now picture yourself out there. Reconstruct the day. You wake before sunrise because that's when the air is coolest and the ground is easiest to walk on. Within an hour, you're already sweating, and the water you're carrying, if you thought to bring any, is already running low. You spot a plant that looks vaguely familiar from a documentary you half watched once. You hesitate. You don't eat it because you genuinely don't know if it's the version that's safe or the version that isn't, and that hesitation costs you time and energy you don't have to spare. By midday, your feet are blistered because your shoes weren't built for this terrain, or you have no shoes at all. Every hunter-gatherer child grows up with feet toughened by a lifetime of walking. Yours haven't had that. You're exhausted, thirsty, and you haven't found a single reliable calorie. Meanwhile, an actual hunter-gatherer covering the same ground would already know exactly where 3 different food sources are located, purely from memory of the terrain built over years of living in it. This is where the story takes its twist, because you'd assume the physical part is the hardest part. It isn't. Persistence hunting, one of the oldest hunting techniques known, involves literally running an animal, like a kudu or an antelope, to exhaustion over the course of several hours in extreme heat, because humans, unlike most four-legged prey, can sweat continuously and dump heat efficiently while running. It sounds almost impossibly hard, and physically it is. But researchers who have studied this method, including work built on decades of tracking studies across the Kalahari, note that the actual hardest part isn't the running itself, it's the tracking. Knowing exactly which set of hoof prints belongs to which specific injured or exhausted animal hours after the chase began across changing terrain is a skill that takes a lifetime to develop. Your legs might eventually get you there. Your eyes and your brain, untrained, would lose the trail in the first 20 minutes. Social knowledge matters just as much as physical skill, and this is a piece almost nobody thinks about. Anthropologist Polly Weissner spent years studying the hoansi and documented something remarkable. Their evening conversations around the fire were rarely about the practical logistics of the day's hunt. Instead, they were filled with storytelling, gossip, and social bonding, the exact kind of interaction that reinforced trust and cooperation within the group. That trust wasn't just social glue, it was survival infrastructure. When your food supply depends on sharing meat with people who might not eat again for days, and when your safety depends on someone else warning you about a predator they spotted near camp, social bonds aren't a nice bonus. They're equipment, just as essential as a spear or a digging stick. Drop a modern person into that group with none of that history, none of that trust, and you're not just missing skills. You're missing your entire support system. So here's the twist worth sitting with. Modern life has convinced you that survival is mostly physical. Strength, endurance, the ability to run and climb and fight. Actual hunter-gatherer survival was, and is, overwhelmingly about accumulated knowledge and social trust, refined and passed down over an entire lifetime inside one specific landscape. You could be the strongest person alive and still not last a single day, because the thing that actually kept people alive for 95% of human history wasn't muscle. It was memory. Memorized plants, memorized water signs, memorized tracking patterns, and a memorized web of relationships that made all of it work. Think about what that means for you today. You live in a world engineered so completely around your survival that you never have to develop any of these skills at all. Your food arrives without you knowing where it grew. Your water flows from a wall without you knowing where it came from. Your safety depends on systems and strangers you'll never meet rather than a small, trusted group you've known your entire life. None of that makes you weak. It makes you a different kind of survivor, adapted to a completely different environment, one built out of infrastructure instead of memorized terrain. But it's worth remembering every time you turn on a tap or open a fridge that the version of you standing there is running on hardware built for something else entirely. Your body still wants to walk for hours. Your brain still wants to track patterns and build trust with the people around you. Those instincts didn't disappear. They just don't have anywhere left to go. Your feet are already cut. You didn't notice until now. And somewhere in a small patch of land your ancestors once called home, someone with the exact same body as yours is walking those same cuts off without a second thought. Because for them, this was simply Tuesday.